Good morning and welcome to the South Carolina Public Service Commission. Today is Monday, February 10th, 2025 at approximately 10 a.m. and we are here for a hearing on 2024-316E. First, I would note for the record that all commissioners are present in the hearing room. Mr. Wimburn, if you would please explain this docket and the purposes of today's hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, commissioners, all of those who are joining today, whether in the hearing room or in person and virtually. This is the proceeding in docket number 2024-316E. This docket concerns the application filed on November 12, 2024 by the South Carolina Public Service Authority, which is also known as Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper seeks from the Commission a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of the Wassamassaw to Pringletown numbers 1 and 2, 230, 115 kV lines and associated facilities. Santee Cooper's application is filed in accordance with the requirements of the South Carolina Utility Facility Siting and Environmental Protection Act found in Chapter 33 of Title 58 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. As part of this, as part of the procedural schedule established in this docket by the Office of the Clerk of the Commission, the hearing was scheduled and noticed by the clerk to the parties and published by Santee Cooper in the newspapers of general circulation as provided by the rules and procedures of the Commission. The hearing begins today at 10 a.m. and shall continue until concluded or otherwise ordered by the chair or presiding officer. Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, the docket is in order. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wimburn. Would the parties now please introduce themselves, beginning with the applicant, Santee Cooper?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Megan Driggers, in-house counsel for Santee Cooper, and with me is Steve Pelcher, Deputy General Counsel for Nuclear and Regulatory Compliance at Santee Cooper.
Thank you and welcome. Other parties, ORS.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Commissioners Chad Torrey and Stig Rasmussen on behalf of ORS.
Thank you very much and welcome this morning. Are there any matters to be discussed before we begin any testimony?
Just an introduction.
Sure. It's all yours.
Okay. Once again, good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. I'm Megan Driggers, once again, in-house counsel for Santee Cooper, and we appreciate the opportunity to be heard today. On November 12, 2024, Santee Cooper filed an application for a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of the Wassamassaw to Pringletown numbers 1 and 2, 230, 115 kV lines and associated facilities pursuant to South Carolina Code Annotated 583310. As a brief overview, Santee Cooper plans to install new lines in Berkeley County, South Carolina from the Wassamassaw substation to the Pringletown substation on the Camp Hall Industrial Park. One circuit will be built for 230 kV but operated initially at 115 kV, and the other will be a 115 kV line. Due to the capability and the designed operating voltage of the 230-115 line, the project triggered the Siting Act. As our transmission witnesses will discuss, the lines are needed in Berkeley County area to serve growth based on transmission planning assessments and to support anticipated load growth. Mr. Christopher Wagner, Santee Cooper's Director of Transmission Planning, Research and Development, will sponsor his pre-filed testimony along with Ms. Kent, a consultant from Burns McDonnell Engineering Company, and they will testify as a panel. As a preliminary matter, Santee Cooper requests to move into the record as the first hearing exhibit, the application and exhibits A through D to the application that Santee Cooper filed on November 12, 2024, as hearing exhibit 1. I'll note that exhibit A, which is also filed as SK1 to Ms. Sarah Kent's testimony, is the environmental report.
The first four exhibits are being presented by Mr. Ms. Kent, or are they all by Ms. Kent, or?
So the application itself, I'm asking to be hearing Exhibit 1, and we
Alright.
filed with that the environmental report. That report also accompanied, is the same report that accompanied Ms. Kent's testimony as SK1.
All right, well, that will be marked for identification and placed in the record as exhibit number 1.
Thank you.
All right, and the SK1 exhibit will be marked for identification and placed in the record as exhibit number 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the 1 through 4, is that separate, or is that in the first thing we put in?
That's with the application, so that's
Okay.
Exhibit A, B, and C. So that's the publication, the publisher's affidavit, and the certificate of service to the statutory parties.
All right, well, exhibits A, B, and C will be part of exhibit 1 then.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Now, one question.
Mr. Chairman, may I seek a clarification?
Sure.
In that the transmission report and appendices is A.
Oh,
but
yes,
then
ma'am.
B, C, and D are the others, right?
Yes, ma'am. So,
Okay.
yeah, sorry about that. So A should be the environmental report. My apologies.
With all the appendices?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And B, C, and D will be just so I can get it straight, will be, the proof of service is Exhibit B. The public notice, it was Exhibit C to the application. And D is the publisher's affidavit.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. I wasn't sure I understood either. I thought, and I've 40-something years of practicing law and doing a lot of DSS work all over the state, I thought I had been to every small town in the state. I had not heard of Pringletown.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's my old stomping ground, so it's where I'm from.
that's a new one on me.
Yeah.
All right, any response from ORS to any of that?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, you may proceed then.
Yes, sir. We'd like to call as Santee Cooper's witnesses, Mr. Christopher Wagner and Miss Sarah Kent.
Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
As our first panel witness, Mr. Christopher Wagner. Mr. Wagner, can you once again state your name for the record?
Christopher Wagner,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Santee Cooper, Director of Transmission Planning.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision 7 pages of direct testimony pre-filed on November 12, 2024?
I did.
Do you have any changes to that testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions today, would your answers remain the same?
They would.
At this time, I request that the direct pre-filed testimony of Mr. Wagner be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Christopher Wagner will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner, do you have a summary of your testimony?
I do.
Could you please provide that at this time?
Sure. Good morning, Chair Powers, members of the Commission. In this proceeding, I submitted direct testimony which outlines my educational background and experience at Santee Cooper, along with ongoing engagements on industry reliability committees and working groups. I also summarized my role at Santee Cooper related to oversight of our open access transmission tariff, including transmission service requests, generator interconnections, and provisions of transmission service. My direct testimony is intended to discuss the need for the construction and operation of the Wassamassaw to Pringletown number 1 and number 2 230 115 kV lines and associated facilities in Berkeley County, South Carolina, and to give an overview of the proposed project. Santee Cooper transmission planning assessments have identified thermal loading violations under contingency scenarios due to actual and projected load growth at the Camp Hall Industrial Park and surrounding areas. These thermal overloads, which constitute violations of NERC transmission planning standards, would be mitigated by the construction of the proposed facilities configured for double circuit 230 115 kV, with both circuits initially operated at 115 kV. By constructing these facilities in this way, it will significantly significantly increase future load-serving capability in the area and reduce the additional right-of-way needed in the future. Santee Cooper currently has limited right-of-way into the Camp Hall Industrial Park and anticipates that 230 kV service will be necessary for future development in the area. The new transmission lines discussed in this proceeding will be installed within a combination of existing rights-of-way and previously acquired easements. The ultimate long-term plan would be to construct two parallel double-circuit 230/115 kV lines from Wassamassaw toward Pringletown along this corridor once the load grows to a level that necessitates redundant 230 kV service. By constructing one of these double-circuit 230/115 kV lines initially and operating both circuits at 115 kV, Santee Cooper can delay the construction of the second double-circuit line while at the same time addressing the near-term need for two 115 kV lines. An alternative was evaluated which considered constructing double-circuit 115 kV lines, but this would not provide the same long-term capability as the 230/115 kV configuration and will likely require significant reconfiguration or reconstruction in the future when 230 kV is required. It was determined that designing and constructing these facilities as proposed in this filing results in the best long-term solution, providing the flexibility needed to serve anticipated load growth in the area. The current estimated cost to construct the proposed facilities is approximately $42.5 million, and the projected in-service date is November 2026. The proposed facilities serve the interest of system economy and reliability and are the most cost-effective solution when considering the anticipated long-term system needs and represent the best-known long-term solution for the continued safe and reliable operation of the Santee Cooper transmission system. The addition of these facilities will provide the transmission capacity needed to serve existing and future load demand and will ensure compliance with NERC reliability standards and Santee Cooper's transmission planning criteria. On behalf of Santee Cooper, I request the Commission issue a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of the proposed 230 kV line and associated facilities. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Also, as part of the hearing panel, Santee Cooper calls Ms. Sarah Kent. Ms. Kent, could you please state your full name for the record?
Sarah Kent.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Burns & McDonnell as the department manager of our Natural and Cultural Resources Group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision 12 pages of direct testimony previously filed with Commission on November 12, 2024?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to that testimony?
No.
At this time, I request the direct pre-filed testimony of Ms. Sarah Kent be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Kent will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Have you prepared or did you cause to be prepared under your supervision the exhibit attached to your testimony as SK1?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit?
No, I do not.
And once again, I'll note that the exhibit attached to SK1 is that environmental report.
And it is in here as Exhibit 2.
Yes, sir. Ms. Kent, do you have a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any documents or any other items to accompany your testimony summary?
Yes, we are providing 2 maps that will aid in explaining the cultural and environmental permitting and surveys that were conducted for the project.
Okay. Chair Powers, I handed 2 maps or 2 pages of maps, and ORS has a copy of those maps as well. And we'd like those maps to be entered into the record as hearing Exhibit 3. Ms. Kent would like to use those just illustrative purposes as she goes through her summary.
Any objection from ORS?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The 2 maps that have been provided will be marked for identification and placed in the record as Exhibit number 3.
Thank you. Ms. Kent, could you please share your testimony summary at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. As noted, I am employed by Burns & McDonnell Engineering Company as a department manager of the Natural and Cultural Resources Group with the Environmental Services Global Practice. I have supported Santee Cooper with substation and transmission line projects, including performing and managing environmental and local permitting and civil design. In this proceeding, I submitted direct testimony on behalf of Santee Cooper. I was a contributing author of the transmission line siting and environmental report for the Wassamassaw to Pringletown number 1 and number 2 230/115 kV transmission line project, which was included in my testimony as Exhibit SK1. My direct testimony discussed the route for the proposed line, the methodology used to evaluate the route, offered an overview of the short and long-term environmental impacts of the project, the impact of the proposed project to rare, threatened, and endangered species and wetlands and streams, and summarized cultural resources studies and a visual effects analysis conducted for the project. The impacts to the environment, if any, from the construction operation of the proposed project are anticipated to be limited to the immediate area where new structures are proposed to be installed. The proposed transmission line will be installed within an existing right-of-way and within previously acquired easements. An estimated 47.7 acres of new right-of-way clearing would be required along Centerline Road. The new right-of-way is predominantly undeveloped wooded land adjacent to industrial areas and paralleling an existing road. Approximately 17 acres of maintenance clearing will be required to accommodate the new 230/115 kV double circuit sections along Santee Tower Road and south of Fish Road until reaching the pole number 51 location. Field surveys identifying environmentally sensitive resources and the permitting procedures for the project were conducted over several years to support the ongoing development of the Camp Hall Industrial Park project. The continuing land use changes and subsequent load growth demands, coupled with changes in legislative and regulatory requirements, resulted in the need for multiple environmental surveys and agency reviews to maintain compliance with current regulations. The attached maps, referenced as Hearing Exhibit 3, summarize the field surveys and permitting conducted with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office for the project. The portion of the project south of Fish Road is included with the Army Corps agency review completed for the Camp Hall Industrial Park project. The remainder of the project received a no permit required determination, as construction activities associated with the project have been designed to avoid permanent impacts to wetlands and waters subject to Corps jurisdiction. Burns and McDonnell conducted a desktop review of the project area using publicly available resources, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wetland Inventory Database, the Natural Resources Conservation Service Web Soil Survey for Berkeley County, South Carolina, the U.S. Geological Survey topographic maps and National Hydrographic Data Set, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Information for Planning and Consultation, or IPAC tool. Terracon Consultants, WSP USA Environmental and Infrastructure, and Burns and McDonnell biologists completed in-person protected species habitat assessments to evaluate the potential for federally protected and state protected species and/or their habitat to occur within the project area. 7 federally protected species and 14 state protected species were identified as potential to occur. It was recommended that the project may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect, the federally protected northern long-eared bat and tricolor bat, and would have no impact on designated critical habitat or any other federally protected species identified as potentially occurring. Further, it was recommended that the proposed project would not jeopardize the continued existence of any threatened or endangered species. The Fish and Wildlife concurred with these findings in 2017 and 2024, respectively. Due to the recent uplisting of the monarch butterfly, and as recommended by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, Burns and McDonnell will be submitting a request for technical assistance to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that includes a recommendation of no effect relative to the potential impacts to the monarch butterfly. We anticipate receiving their response in the coming weeks. Regarding state protected species, Burns and McDonnell submitted a consultation letter on October 21st, 2024 to the DNR that recommended the project may affect, but was not likely to adversely affect, the Raffinesque big-eared bat and the spotted turtle. Our determinations for these specific species were based on information reviewed, data and observations collected during in-person surveys, and implementation of species-specific avoidance and minimization measures during project construction that are consistent with DNR guidance. Our DNR consultation letter also recommended that no other state protected species would be impacted for the proposed project. The DNR responded on December 18th, 2024, requesting additional information and clarification on a few details associated with the project, recommended manual clearing within a 50-foot buffer around Catton Creek that intersects the project, and consulting with Fish and Wildlife regarding potential impacts to the monarch butterfly. Burns and McDonnell responded to the DNR's request for additional information in a letter dated January 16, 2025. The DNR responded on January 22nd, 2025, with no further comments or questions. Wetlands and water delineations were conducted by Terracon, WSP, and Burns and McDonnell. A total of 3 streams and 20 wetlands totaling approximately 10.2 acres were delineated for the project. No tidal, channel, or tidal wetland crossings are proposed. Within the identified wetland areas, clearing and construction activities will involve the use of high flotation, low pressure equipment, or temporary matting to minimize ground disturbance. Best management practices, or BMPs, will be implemented as required by the project's Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan and implemented by a construction contractor prior to construction commencing. These BMPs may include temporary matting, silt fencing, sediment tubes, vegetative buffers, and single-lane travel paths. No impairment of water flow is expected. The intent is to restore ruts and depressions as soon as possible. No permanent impacts to wetlands or streams are proposed, as avoidance and minimization efforts have been implemented to the maximum extent practicable. Terracon and Environmental Corporation of America, or ECA, a subcontractor of Burns & McDonnell, conducted Phase 1 cultural resources surveys for the proposed project, and both determined the project was unlikely to have any direct or indirect adverse effects to significant archaeological resources or historic structures. Terracon's findings were submitted to SHPO and received concurrence in 2017. ECA's survey was conducted for a separate project that overlaps the northern portion of this project. ECA submitted their findings to SHPO on December 23, 2024. SHPO responded on January 24, 2025, requesting a more extensive historic architectural survey and additional information for an archaeological site located outside the project area. However, because no historic structures were identified in or within close proximity to the project area, and the archaeological site in question is not located within the project area, we anticipate the SHPO would concur that this project would have no indirect or direct adverse effects and impacts to cultural and historic resources. Burns & McDonnell and ECA are in the process of completing SHPO consultation for the overlapping project, and it is anticipated that the SHPO will concur with no effect determination for this project within the coming weeks. The project will have low to moderate overall visual effects associated with the new right-of-way clearing. The project is located within and adjacent to the Camp Hall Industrial Park area, where transmission lines are not out of the ordinary, and no nearby residential properties or other sensitive receptors are present. Additionally, the route primarily parallels existing roads and is surrounded by undeveloped lands, where trees provide additional visual screening. As stated in my direct testimony, the impact of the proposed line upon the environment is justified considering available technology and the nature and economics of alternatives, as this route minimizes the effects to the environment, land use, cultural resources, and aesthetics. In my professional judgment, Santee Cooper's decision to use the proposed route was proper. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Chair Powers and members of the commission, Mr. Wagner and Ms. Kent are now available for cross-examination and for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Driggers. Any questions from ORS?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner questions? Commissioner Belson.
Good morning. How are y'all this morning? Mr. Wagner, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me get back to my questions here. In your direct testimony and in your summary, you talked about thermal loading, and could you explain a little bit more about that for me?
Yeah, so a transmission line is really rated based on its ability to withstand the thermal characteristics that current flowing on that line produces or creates. I may tell you a little more than you really want to know here.
No, go ahead.
A transmission line it's a bunch of metal conductors. They're put together strands basically, and as it heats up, it expands, and as it cools, it contracts. The rating of the line is really a thermal element that is translated into a current and an ampacity rating. So that's what the thermal characteristics of the line is alluding to. So it can only handle so much heat, essentially.
Okay, and when you talk about a thermal overload, what are you talking about?
That it goes beyond its rated capacity.
Okay.
It's rated temperature, which is translated into an ampacity value.
And why are, or what is the impact of thermal overloads?
So the line can as it expands, it can sag, and it can sag to the point where it becomes a clearance issue for anything that's underneath it.
Okay.
So it sags to a point where it's above the ground, to a level that's unsafe.
Does increased, I'm not sure how to phrase this. I'm gonna say load, but like increased usage by end users create a problem with the loading capability?
Correct. So the load that is served by the line is what creates the amp flow, the power flow across the line that heats the line up, that
Okay.
Brings it to its thermal capability.
So if too many people are trying to pull energy off of a line, is that what creates the
Correct.
overload?
Correct.
And who is responsible for maintaining or making sure that the overloads don't occur?
So we are, as the planning authority, Santee Cooper does that, and that's the long-term approach. And then as the balancing authority and the transmission operator in real time, we have that obligation as well.
And there are standards on how much load can be on any given size line, is that correct?
Correct. There's ratings associated with that line.
And who sets those?
So they're set by our design area, determines based on the way that the line is configured and the way the line is designed, that dictates what the facility rating.
Okay, and you mentioned NERC in your testimony as well. How do they fit into this?
So in a lot of ways, so NERC oversees reliability standards that have to do with the way we plan the facilities, the way we design the facilities, and the way we operate the facilities. So there are minimum standards that NERC sets that guide how we do all of those things and how we rate the facility as well.
Well, and are there any standards that apply to loading capabilities or exceeding loading capabilities?
Correct. So FAC 8 is the facility ratings standard that NERC has established, and it deals with how to. It basically says that you will have a methodology for how you rate facilities, and there's some guidance as to how you go about doing that. And then on the planning side, we have standards that say we will not exceed under our studies, under contingency scenarios, we will not exceed those ratings. And then in real-time operations, there are standards that say that that dictate you will not exceed the facilities in real time, or the ratings in real time as well.
And what happens if Santee Cooper exceeds those ratings?
We could be found in noncompliance to NERC reliability standards, but also it becomes, you could have a public safety concern, and you could damage equipment. We could damage the line or other terminal equipment that's connected to the facility.
Okay. Now, this proposed line, and how do you say it? Wassamassaw?
Wassamassaw.
Wassamassaw, okay. And it is going from the Wassamassaw substation to a substation at Camp Hall
It's
Industrial
inside Camp
Park.
Hall. Yes, ma'am.
And that's where Volvo is located?
That's correct.
Who serves the customers at Camp Hall Industrial Park?
It's a mixture. There is service territory that Edisto Electric Cooperative has,
Okay.
and they currently serve Volvo. There is service territory that Berkeley Electric Cooperative has, and there is service territory that Santee Cooper Retail.
Okay, y'all do have some direct serve
do.
there.
Yes, ma'am.
At this substation there, where this proposed line would terminate, does that also serve the cooperatives?
It does. It
Okay.
serves. It's currently the transmission source that serves all of the end delivery points out of that are in the Camp Hall facility.
And I think there's a highway. This is between Interstate 26 and
176. will be on the other side.
176. And how would you explain the growth in that area?
It's been very aggressive, especially from, let's say, Highway 27, which is where Pringletown is, toward Charleston. On the Berkeley County side of the interstate has really expanded very.
So even though this line is going from one substation to another substation, the ending substation is in the industrial park, will this line just be serving load in the industrial park?
No, ma'am. It will also serve residential delivery points that are right now mostly Berkeley Electric cooperative delivery points, but serving communities like Nexton, Cane Bay, all of the areas on the Berkeley County side of the interstate that have all the neighborhoods that have grown in that area. I don't know if any of y'all have driven through there, but it's
Oh, yeah.
pretty impressive what's been built there as quickly as it has.
I don't call it impressive, I call it scary, but that's just me. I grew up in the country, so that many people that close together really bothers me. So when you are when Santee Cooper is planning, well, even under existing infrastructure, how are projected system overloads determined?
It's a great question. So we model the transmission system, and the transmission system's not just what we model is not just our own system. We're modeling really goes to the Eastern Interconnection, but then we scale it down so we can focus on our stuff. But it's a model that is coordinated on an annual basis with all of our neighbors, and that's all done by the CERC region, which is a regional entity of NERC. So we get our modeling data together there, and then the models allow us to run contingencies. So to take lines or certain elements of the system out and see how the rest of the system operates or adapts to it, right? And then once we understand that, we can see under those contingency scenarios, are there facilities that exceed their ratings? And then in those models includes load projections, things that we know that are coming. That's how we assess how those changes take place, right? How those changes might impact the reliability of the system, in yearly increments, but out to about a 10-year time frame is currently what we look at.
So CERC and NERC are aware of these. Are they aware of these modeling runs and projections that may call for new transmission or lines or anything?
They are via our modeling. So when we identify the need, we include that in our model, and then that is reviewed by the in our neighboring utilities as well as the CERC.
Okay.
Mainly.
So in your summary, I think there was a sentence on page 2 at the end of that first paragraph that continued from the first page. The last sentence, it was determined that designing and constructing these facilities as proposed results in the best long-term solution. Who makes that decision and how?
So that would be a decision that Santee Cooper would make.
Okay.
So what we determine
And
is.
Let me interrupt there. When you say Santee Cooper, who is that? Is that your group? Is it the board? Is it some other group? Who's responsible for that decision?
So it starts with my group. My area determines the need, and then determines the solution to fulfill that need. And then through our internal planning processes, it ends up being once it's included in our budgets and in our long-term 10-year plan, then that is the kind of the corporate approval process.
Okay. Going on down in your direct testimony, in your summary, you have stated that the proposed facilities serve the interest of system economy and reliability. Tell me what system economy means to you.
So that we're doing the facilities that we're proposing are the most cost effective over the long term. that what we're doing is in the best interest of our ratepayers and our customers.
And as I read the application, there was one other alternative that was looked at?
Correct. We evaluated.
Thank you. Evaluated. is a
We
much better word.
evaluated. Basically, instead of building this facility as double circuit 230-115, we evaluated building it as double circuit 115, and that would have addressed the issues in the near term. But given that we project the need for 230 kV service into Camp Hall, into that area in the future, it's more long-term cost-effective to go ahead and build those facilities with one line being capable of conversion to 230 kV in the future, versus building them both for 115 and having to go back and reconfigure or potentially reconstruct those facilities in the future. It's much lower cost to do it all at once and get it completed.
There's still room for other industries in the Camp Hall Industrial Park. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, still a lot of room.
There is.
Okay. And how about system reliability? Tell me what you mean by that.
So the ability to operate the system under various contingency scenarios without detrimental effect to the system or to public safety or to the ability for our customers to continue uninterrupted service.
And how is that system reliability, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say measured?
So there are a lot of different ways to measure reliability. There's a lot of different metrics that are tracked. We have used a metric that we've called ASAI for transmission, but it's an average system availability index. And really what it says is what percentage of the time is the transmission system available to the delivery point substations that we serve. We're typically, our target every year is 99.997%, which equates to around 15 minutes of total transmission system outage time on an annual basis.
Is that a national kind of standard?
That is not. It's akin to some of the national standards out there, but because we have a high amount of wholesale load on our system, it was difficult for us to translate into a statistic that or a metric that the industry uses that's more retail based. So we developed the ASAI kind of because of that. We're moving toward some other metrics that are a little more benchmarkable, but ASAI is what we've traditionally tracked.
And tell me that percentage again,
99.997%.
Okay.
That's our target, and we typically meet that target.
I noted, I think that's all I've got right now.
Okay.
No, this is in yours too. I'm sorry. In your direct testimony, you indicated the projected in-service date is November 2026.
Yes, ma'am.
In the report, was it listed as December 2025 in the transmission report?
I do not know. I know that the project's folks are telling us their target is the end of 26 at this point.
Was there a I have gotten somewhere, and this may be a question for council, was an application filed and then an exhibit refiled?
Not in this case.
Because I've got a bunch of, a whole lot of documents that are noted Wassamassaw to Indian Field Transmission Line Project, and I don't think that's the same one.
It's not the same one. These are sort of, and Ms. Kent might explain, they might overlap at times, and she
Okay.
may explain how the surveys are done.
Okay.
This area, those are all.
I was
close.
trying to figure that out. So
Yes, ma'am, and Ms. Kent might be able to
Ms.
explain.
Kent, can you help me with that?
Yes, yes, and for that, I will refer you back to the map that I gave you guys at the beginning.
Well, and is this map somewhere included in the report? Just a blow up?
No, ma'am, not this exact map,
Okay.
but this just was kind of a summary as we were going through the hearing here. So and I'll refer you to the SHPO concurrence map of the two. So the northern
Wait a minute,
portion,
which one is that?
that's the one that has the purple on it.
Got it.
Yep. So that's the northern portion of that from the Wassamassaw substation, that purple portion on the very north part, that is for the Wassamassaw to Indian Field project, which is the overlapping project to this one. So that's why you received Indian Field
Well, and I just
documentation.
wanted, one thing that I noted on one of those maps was that there seemed to be a crossing at the Beetler Forest.
Yes, ma'am, that is for that separate
It's not
project.
part of this one.
No, ma'am, no,
Okay.
ma'am, and that will be separate, that will be filed separately at a later date.
Okay,
Yes,
all right. Well, thank you for that clarification.
yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Sharon, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. Any further commissioner questions?
Chair Powell.
Commissioner Caston.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I guess kind of following up some on, I guess, Commissioner Belser's questions and responses, which, thank you, by the way. Relative to, I guess, statement in your direct testimony, page 6, lines 18 through 22, I think, where you talked about associated reliability requirements of the customer, which I think you responded to that, but I wanted to make sure the customer is not a singular customer. Did you mean a singular customer or the ubiquitous?
So I think that statement could be more broadly interpreted to be either. So there's reliability requirements that we establish for the broader customer base that are standard customers on the system, but there are also higher reliability needs of specific customers that may have certain processes associated with their manufacturing or whatever it is that they're doing that might require a different level of reliability. And so that statement in there is really intended to be broad to cover both of them.
All right, but the bottom line is this particular project isn't just for a customer. Okay, thank you. And relative to, your response on system economy and thinking back to maybe some other hearings where it's kind of been discussed, does system economy mean something that affects the whole system, or it could a portion of the system? What does that mean to you?
So I think it could be either. It depends on the specific application of the project that we're talking about. Some are more specifically targeted to certain areas, certain regions. Others may be more broad, and maybe system economy could be broadened to a larger customer base. Let me also clarify your previous question. The facilities we're talking about here, the 230 kV component, right now would be used for the broader service to the Camp Hall area. There may be certain scenarios where the 230 kV component in the future could be necessary to serve a single customer depending on how large they are and what configuration they need to be served in. So I just wanted to make that clear. We don't know exactly what that 230 kV service might look like in the future. We just anticipate that it will be required in that area given the load growth we're seeing. So it could be necessary for that 230 kV facility to be directly serving a specific customer in the future, and just wanted to make sure.
Okay, Santee Cooper is simply preparing for growth in demand. It may be data center, other industry, residential, commercial, or all the above.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Understand. Trying to find where it was. Yeah, I think on page 7. I can read it. You don't have to look it up, but unless you want to. lines, I think 8 through 12, you talk about proposed facilities serve the interest, system economy, and reliability. Proposed facilities are the most cost-effective solution when considering the anticipated long-term needs, anticipated constraints, and represent the best known long-term solution for continued and reliable operations, which we've already, heard, your definition of those. But in this case, basically, system economy and reliability in this case simply means it's the least cost and most reliable option.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Kent, I don't have anything. Mr. Wagner, thank you for your responses.
Thank you.
No more questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman, could I follow up on one thing?
Commissioner Belson.
That December 2025 date that I referenced,
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
in the transmission line siting report on page 1-4.
Okay,
That's,
we can make that correction, so.
well, it's on the record. I just didn't want y'all to think I'd made it up.
Yeah.
So.
Our apologies for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
Just like to say I like the name of this project. I'm not sure I can pronounce it, but it appeals to me. So at a very, very basic level, you've been talking about thermal loading, and my understanding is that's how electricity moves. Whether it's a small amount of electricity or a lot, it moves by, I don't know, producing heat. That's kind of the basic starting point for discussion. Is that correct? I mean, the laws of physics with moving electricity. Could you say a little bit about that?
Sure. Heat is going to be created. It's part of the losses associated with moving power.
Okay.
Losses.
And so the cost, you mentioned 42.5 million being the estimated cost. And we've heard things recently about how those costs get allocated, and some of it's subject to federal law, federal rules, or whatever. And you've mentioned different co-ops and customers, and is that cost allocated in any way, or is that just all Santee Cooper?
Yeah, so yes, there are cost allocation attributes of our contracts with our customers, and so typically at Santee Cooper, it's a cost-based model, and costs are allocated based on use, effectively based on the load that you and you're contributing to the need based on your load, and that's how costs end up getting allocated on a percent basis in most cases.
Mr. Chairman.
And that would be for our kind of for the wholesale portion of the.
Could we ask the witness to adjust that mic upwards a little bit?
Yes, ma'am.
It'll bend up.
It's movable.
All right. So are there any federal rules that come into play on how cost is allocated here in this project?
So not in this case, and not typically for Santee Cooper. We're not FERC jurisdictional from that perspective, so we don't necessarily fall under the same sets of federal cost allocation attributes that an investor-owned would. Some of the newer, FERC 1920 you may have heard of, some of the new FERC federal orders may do some things differently. We're still trying to unwind some of that, but for today, we don't typically fall under the same set of cost allocation.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Any, Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Mr. Wagner, my question is for you. You probably don't need it, but it's at the bottom of page 6 of your testimony. where you make a very simple point, and it makes sense to me instinctually, but I'd like for you to just outline it a little more. This is where you're referencing Code 58-33-180A1 and to ensure that this is the most cost-efficient, effective means for serving customers. And then there's a reference in A1B talking about energy efficiency measures. And what you say is, and I get it, I just think there may be need for more information in the record, is that the requirement for energy efficiency analysis is better suited for generation than transmission. Will you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Sure, and I'll add, in this case, what we're talking about is all brand new loads. So they would be configured and constructed in the most energy efficient way possible with respect to cost for the customer. So in having said that, the efficiency gains you might get from in this case would be minimal, right?
Would be what?
Would be minimal or maybe non-existent, because these are brand new, either brand new homes that are being constructed in the most energy efficient way, or brand new industry as well that would be energy efficient as well. So there wouldn't be much, if anything, to gain from an energy efficiency perspective. This the statute is a little bit difficult from a transmission perspective, because it really is kind of geared more toward things that you look at when you're looking at adding incremental generation, right? So that's really all it was getting at is effectively energy efficiency, off-system purchase options, joining a regional transmission organization, those types of things don't really apply very well here, and typically don't apply very well to a transmission project in general.
And I guess related to one of the points you made in answering that, and related to Commissioner Thomas's question, and the generation of heat and transmission, are there efficiencies that you are gaining by installing this transmission in proximity to a high energy user? Thinking about loss of load along the way? That's
great. Yeah, it's a great point.
I don't know.
Absolutely. So the Wassamassaw substation is a source. It's a relatively strong source, and so the shorter transmission lines we can have from a source station to a load, the less losses you're going to have on the system. So,
is there any way to describe that numerically?
Not that I could,
okay.
Nothing. But I mean, it's just intuitively the closer you put sources and shorter you make transmission lines where there's concentrations of load, the less losses you're going to get on the system.
In general, is the energy making system doing a better job of creating more efficient transmission over time, or is that loss of load something that we just have to live with? If you know.
Losses are mainly reduced when you can put your generating resources close to your load centers. The further geographically you get with generators away from load centers, the more losses you're gonna place on the system. So that's what we try and manage.
Okay. And Ms. Kent, mostly because you're here, did Terracom evaluate and prepare Santee Cooper for archaeological elements like burial sites? And are there ways that they have reduced the likelihood of finding those?
So as part of the surveys that are conducted, they look through not just archaeological, but those all encompassing, including burial sites, are included in the investigations that are conducted.
So if there were, a family plot or from long ago, right, or a
yes, cemeteries
church
are looked at as well, and so forth. So yes, all that's been evaluated. And Terracon did their investigations in 2017, and all they found was one archaeological site that was not eligible, and then the SHPO concurred. So yes.
Okay. And is that all through, paper data information, or is there survey work as well?
Both. It's records review and field surveys as well.
What do field surveys involve?
So I'm not an archaeologist, but they involve shovel testing and per increments and just, like you said, visual, like if they come up across something that may look like a burial ground and so forth, they mark that and then do additional investigations. But mostly shovel testing is what it involves.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Castle.
I wanted to follow up on some of that discussion relative to where Commissioner Williams was talking about the loss or whatever. I wanted to make sure I understood that. Like in a distribution system, water, for example, is wastewater for that matter, typically it's measured by, head loss or something like that. You put it in a model and what your current demand is, what your future demand is, figure head loss, what size pipe. In the modeling that Santee Cooper does, is there not some equivalent? While it wouldn't be head loss, I would assume it would be, losses and.
Yeah, so the line's impedance characteristics, so its resistance and reactive components are modeled, and so that's how we determine, and then the load's resistive and reactive characteristics as well are modeled, and so that's how we determine how much flow we'd see on the line and what the loss of that specific line might be under certain scenarios. The more heavily loaded it is, or lighter loaded, your loss characteristics can change pretty dramatically. So it depends on, what time of day it is, the scenario that, it can all change.
All right, but as far as a measure of efficiency, I think I understood you to say that, the closer you are to the generation and the load, either the less line, the bigger the line, the less losses.
Correct. The shorter you have to transmit the power, the lower your losses are going to be.
Same thing with water and sewer. Fancy that. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Any further commissioner questions? Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Wagner, you've talked a bit about system economy, and that in part that involves cost. And one thing I've noticed is when you're driving around and you see a whole bunch of transmission lines and towers, you see sometimes towers, you sometimes see the big metal poles and sometimes wooden poles. And so I'm assuming a benefit cost analysis happens at some point in terms of which type you use, and probably the type of soil, different things come into play. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So it wouldn't necessarily be on a line by line basis that would take place, but certainly, anytime, basically it can be regional, right? And it may depend on the soil boring information you get back when you're doing your design on the line as to what style of structure you use. Typically, you're going to use like an embedded type structure where you've got soft enough soil to be able to do it. If you get up into mountainous terrain where you've got rocks to deal with, that sort of thing, that's where you start to see a little bit more of the lattice tower construction. Their foundations don't have to be quite as deep, right? So so there's less foundation work that goes into those types. Where you've got really soft soil, you may, in a lot of cases, what we end up using is vibratory caissons, so the big metal tubes that get vibrated into the ground to a certain depth, and then the transmission, the monopole, single pole structure gets set on top of those. So it just really depends on, it's more regional based than it is, doing and it's based on the geology, like you implied in your question. So it's not something that you do every single time you go to design a project. You take the soil borings and then you understand from that what's appropriate given given the geology in the area.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Further commissioner questions? And I don't know which one of you could answer this best. Where are the, I keep seeing conversations with DNR and other agencies. Where does all that stand now?
Yeah, I can answer that for you. So the DNR, we have completed consultation with the DNR. They had some questions about the project, which we answered in a letter earlier in January, and then they responded in January that they have no further comments or questions. So that's consultation's complete.
Yeah.
With the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, as I mentioned, previously the project had received concurrence, but then the monarch butterfly was recently uplisted from a candidate species to proposed threatened. So the DNR recommended that we reconsult with Fish and Wildlife. So we are in the process of doing that right now. Again, we anticipate no effect to the butterfly for this project, but we will receive their response in the coming weeks.
Berkeley County being in the coastal zone of this whole area, is there any further permits that you're going to have to get that will be pending our approval or whatever?
No, sir. The coastal zone consistency determination has been received, so that is complete. We've also permitted the stormwater pollution prevention plan with the Department of Environmental Services. That has also been approved under the construction general permit, so that is complete as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Wagner, I think you've already been asked this major customer, pretty much, we're talking about Volvo, is that correct, in that area?
So Volvo is one of the customers that are in
Okay.
the Camp Hall area.
I kind of got lost back in there not too long ago, and there's a lot of apartments, things that apparently don't show on this map that are being built behind there, back in that area. An incredible amount of growth right there it's like a new town.
It is. They've built things very quickly there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you both. Any redirect from
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Commissioner
a
Bell?
question? Would there be any problem with providing, when these other concurrences from other agencies come in, would there be any issue with providing copies of those just for the record, just for the file on the DMS?
We can, for informational purposes, when we receive the letters, I think we've done that in another docket.
Just for informational, that's all I'm
Yes, ma'am.
seeking.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Would that be okay, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. Anything further from the commission? Okay, thank you. And Ms. Driggers, any redirect?
And no, sir.
I think the court reporter was asking if these would be late filed exhibits, and I'm not asking for a late filed exhibit. It's for informational purposes, just on the status of the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson.
Is the only reason. I know we usually have in the order that if something is approved, we usually have in the order to notify us upon commercial completion or about any unusual delays, but just to kind of keep us apprised.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything redirect from Ms. Driggers?
No, sir.
All right. You may stand down.
Thank you.
Let's take about a 10-minute break right now before the wrap this up with other witnesses, and I'll be back at 11:15. We're in recess. Welcome back. We are still in a hearing on Santee Cooper's request on citing case, which is docket number 2024-316-E. It's my understanding that Santee Cooper has completed their case. All right, and now ORS, your witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ORS calls Donald Shane Hyatt to the stand.
Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Hyatt. Could you please state your name and occupation?
My name is Donald Shane Hyatt. I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as project manager for Santee Cooper.
And Mr. Hyatt, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket 10 pages of direct testimony on January 14th, 2025?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions today posed in your direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
And Mr. Hyatt, is it correct that you did not have any exhibits to your testimony?
That's correct.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask that the pre-filed direct testimony of Donald Shane Hyatt be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Donald Shane Hyatt will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Hyatt, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
I did.
Please present that to the commission and parties at this time.
All right. Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the commission. My testimony provides the results of ORS's examination and review of Santee Cooper's application for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity for construction and operation of the Wassamassaw to Pringletown numbers 1 and 2, 230, 115 kV transmission lines and associated facilities in Berkeley County, South Carolina. My review focused specifically on Santee Cooper's compliance with the Siting Act, the nature of the probable environmental impact of the project, whether the impact of the project upon the environment is justified, the reasonable assurances that the proposed project will conform to applicable state and local laws and regulations issued thereunder, and whether the project will serve public convenience and necessity. Based on the information provided by Santee Cooper, ORS understands the project may result in minimal environmental impact. ORS further understands the project may serve the interests of system economy and reliability and may support Santee Cooper's ability to provide reliable electric service to its customers. On this basis, ORS does not oppose a finding that the project will serve the public convenience and necessity. Should the Commission approve the application, ORS recommends that Santee Cooper file updates with the Commission and ORS on the construction of the project, completion of the project, and date of commercial operation. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Mr. Chair, Mr. Hyatt's available for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the company?
No, sir.
Commissioner questions? Mr. Hyatt, this is your lucky day.
All right. Thank you.
You may stand down. Anything further from the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Anything further from the company?
No, sir.
All right. Well, good job all. And Mr. Wimber will talk to the attorneys, but I guess we're adjourned.